Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this special City Council meeting to order. And the purpose of this meeting is, of course, to conduct a public meeting. And the first item is declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none, I'll turn it over to the clerk.
We can't hear you, Tatiana.
Can you hear me now? Is that a little bit better?
That's better, yes.
Okay. So item 3 is an adjournment to a public meeting for a proposed official plan amendment, draft plan of subdivision application and zone change application. And there is a motion that the special council meeting adjourn to a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear from members of the public with respect to official plan amendment 001-21, draft plan of subdivision application 31T21-001, and zone change application Z01-21 regarding 4117 Perth Line 36, and to reconvene following the public meeting.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Ritzman and Councillor Vasilakos that we adjourn for the purpose of conducting a public meeting. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. The purpose of this public meeting is to give council and the public an opportunity to hear all interested persons with respect to official plan application OPA 01-21, draft plan of subdivision application 31T21-001, and zone change application Z01-21. The application affects the property with the municipal address of 4117 Perth Line 36 in the City of Stratford. The order of procedure for this meeting is as follows. Staff will present the application. The applicant or their agent will then make a presentation. Council may ask questions for the purposes of clarifying the application, but are cautioned not to make comments nor take a position on the application at this public meeting. Registered delegations will be asked for their presentations, comments, and questions. Questions and comments from the Q&A will be read by the clerk's office staff member. The public is advised that if a person has not provided council with oral submissions at a public meeting or written submissions before a bylaw is adopted or a decision is made, the local planning appeal tribunal has the power to dismiss an appeal. The public is advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record for full disclosure. Are there any questions as to this order of procedure? Seeing none, we'll proceed with the meeting. And at this time, we'll hear from staff planner Jeff Bannon to present the application. Mr. Bannon.
Thank you. And again, I think I'm having difficulty sharing my screen. So if I could get the city clerk to pull up the presentation. And while they're preparing it, I'll get started on the presentation. The subject lands are located on the north side of McCarthy Road West between Fraser Drive and Greenwood Drive. They have an approximate area of 21 hectares, a lot frontage of 173 meters on McCarthy Road West, and 812 meters on Perth Line 36. The applications were submitted on November 24th and were deemed complete on December 18th, 2020. Several reports were submitted in support of the application, including a planning justification report, servicing letter, stormwater management report, transportation impact study, and a noise assessment. The proposed official plan amendment is to redesignate the subject lands from residential area and medium density residential to a medium density residential area special to allow for additional residential uses, including single detached, semi, townhouse, apartment, and back-to-back townhouse dwelling units with a minimum density of 16 units per hectare and a maximum density of 100 units per hectare. The amendment also proposes a maximum height of 6 stories for apartment dwellings and 4 stories for any other residential use. They are intending to also alter the regulatory flood hazard in the parks and open space boundaries. The proposed draft plan of subdivision contains 6 medium density residential blocks, a park block with an easement, forest main easement, a block for the McNamara drain, blocks for road windings, multi-use trail, and reserves, 0.3 meter reserves. Subdivision would be serviced by 2 local roads and an extension of Fraser Drive. The lands are proposed to accommodate up to a maximum of 526 new residential units. The zoning bylaw amendment requests to rezone the lands from agricultural to a residential 4th density bracket 2 special zone, a park zone, and a floodplain zone. The R42 zone would permit cluster housing in the form of single detached, semi-townhouse, back-to-back, stacked townhomes and apartment dwellings, and would allow for a maximum of 526 dwelling units until additional servicing has been provided and to ensure floodplain works are completed. For comments that have been received, there have been no concerns raised by Hydro One. Engineering does not have any objection to the official plan and zone change application. We have also received comments recently after the submission of the report from the Township of Perth East. And their concerns are they want to ensure that there's no impacts to the drainage on Perth East lands. And they want to be consulted with entrances on Perth Line 36. The public was also consulted. The application was sent to 71 property owners in January, and no public comments have been received to date. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, is there any plan to have any access off of line 36? Do you know?
Through your worship, they have a window street on line 36 with one access being shown at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ritzma.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Will there be any retention or catchment ponds in the area because it is a low area?
Through your worship, I haven't reviewed the stormwater management report, but they do show a park block, which likely will include some sort of a stormwater management pond in that area.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions from council at this time, I'd invite Megan Garrity, an agent on behalf of the applicant, to speak to the application. Ms. Garrity, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Oh, perfect. So good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Megan Garrity. I'm a senior planner with GSP Group, and I'm here with you this afternoon on behalf of the applicant to describe our proposal for the development of 4117 Perth Line 36. And I believe on the line as well, but they're muted right now, are Dave Tennant, the applicant, and Kyle McIntosh, who is with MTE. Next slide, please. So the site is located at the northwesterly end of Stratford, as you well know, at the edge of the community. Surrounding the site on either side and to the south are other residential lands or lands being developed for residential uses. And north of the site along Perth Line are some agricultural lots that also have some residential dwellings on them as well. Next slide, please. So this draft plan is the final plan in a series of many other draft plans which you would have seen over the years put forward by the applicant. This just shows the procession of these developments in phases starting south of McCarthy, basically 1 through 4. Phase 4 was the latest phase which was registered last year and included the development of the pump station block and force main that runs northwards towards Perth Line. Phase 5 is all north of McCarthy and is the next phase to be registered as part of that draft plan approval, which also includes a portion of the redevelopment of the McNamara drain. The proposed development is just adjacent to phase 5 and also includes a small portion of the drain. Next slide, please. There have been a number of city-approved plans and reports completed for this area of the city, including the Stratford West Secondary Plan, which provides the direction for the land use of this area. the Quinlan Sewage Pump Station and Force Main Preliminary Design reports, which are now being put into place, as well as the Roadhouse McNamara Drain Floodplain Management and Stormwater Management Report, which is being put into action as well through the drainage works that are ongoing right now, as well as the Stratford West Transportation Report. Next slide, please. And all of these studies have been supplemented with updated information that pertains specifically to the subject lands. As part of this application, we've completed a planning report, servicing letter, stormwater management report, environmental noise assessment, transportation study, archaeological assessment, and a vegetation overview, all in support of the proposed development. Next slide, please. Now, Jeff provided a nice summary of all of this already, so I don't want to take too much time, but essentially the site is designated both medium density residential as well as residential area, so the yellow and the light pink. Next slide, please. And so as you see, we've proposed to carry forward the official plan designation from the northerly portion of the previous draft approved plan, so that fuchsia color, changing the site from, again, the mix of the residential area designation and medium density designation to medium density residential special, basically blending the two existing designations together, and also adding a park block, which I'll speak to in a few minutes as well. Next slide, please. So just as a comparison, this allows for the same mix of units as what is currently permitted in the existing designation, but just allows for additional flexibility into the design of those blocks and where the types of units can be located. It will blend the density from the current density permissions, which are 30 to 100 units per net hectare for medium density residential and 12 to 25 for the residential area designation, to a 16 to 100 units per hectare per block range of density for the proposed development. In either case, the maximum number of units, as Jeff mentioned, permitted on the site will be 526 based on available servicing. Next slide, please. And this just showcases the existing flood limits. And next slide. And this is what we're proposing once the drainage works have been completed. Next slide, please. This just shows the existing zoning. So it's currently agricultural, and we're now looking to implement the residential as was shown in the secondary plan reports and is already designated as such. Next slide, please. So we're looking to do an R42 zone, which will permit a range of residential uses as Jeff had listed before. This is the same zoning as was approved for the previous subdivision adjacent to these lands, the phase 4 and phase 5 lands north of McCarthy that I pointed out earlier. The zoning also includes a park and floodplain zoned areas according to where those blocks are located on the plan. And we've also carried over the holding provisions, which were, again, similar to the ones in the previous draft approved plan adjacent to this site, which will limit servicing in the H1 area to the 526 units, and the H2 area is limiting development based on the floodplain limits. But once the drainage course is reconfigured, that holding can be removed, and if it is in fact completed beforehand, we might not need to apply it at all. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to kind of hone in on the blocks that we would be creating through the draft plan approval process. Next slide, please. And we've got 5 residential blocks, the park block and the municipal drain, as well as a few municipal roads that you can see there in white. Next slide, please. These are the main connector points. So at the bottom, we've got the connection through to Fraser Drive. And then on the westerly side of the plan, there are 2 connections to the neighboring draft approved lands, which connect up with the plans that were already approved there. And then we've got the 1 access north out to Perth Line, as was mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. And these are more of the pedestrian connections that we wanted to provide or highlight. So the city has asked for road widening along Perth Line 36 to accommodate a multi-use path, and we hope to create a nice connection down from there through the access point to the site onto the park block, and in the fullness of time, there's to be a pedestrian crossing or bridge over the drain to allow access through to the other side of the drain, and which will provide access down to the park on the south side of McCarthy Road West, which is a bit larger of a park, and beside the Rotary Center. And there's also to be a pathway established on the south side of the drain as well for walking and biking and that kind of thing. Next slide. And while we don't have a firm design yet for each of the blocks, we have done up some preliminary concepts to see sort of how things will fit and what can be put there. So this is just a snapshot of two of the sections of the site and what they could hold. We've shown, you know, some townhouses here and potentially an apartment block. This is all very conceptual and will be defined further as we go along throughout the process and later on after registration as well. But you'll see in this sort of B image, there's a stormwater management pond there. So to answer the councillor's question from before, some of these blocks will require stormwater management ponds within them. And I don't believe there will be anyone in the park block, excuse me, but we'll need to determine that as each of the blocks is developed. Next slide, please. So in summary, we've got the three applications: the draft plan, which would create the residential blocks and the roads, the official plan designation changing it to medium density residential special, and the zoning that matches with our 4.2 and the holding provisions as described. We think that the plan overall will allow for flexibility for future development, allowing for a mix of units that we think is appropriate for the area. And as I mentioned before, I'm available for questions, and I believe Dave Tennant and Kyle McIntosh have registered as well if there are any questions for them too.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant? Councillor Vasilakos, then Councillor Ritzma.
Yeah, I had a question in one of the earlier slides. It looked like when you're amalgamating the two zonings, did you end up with a minimum density that goes from 30 to 16? I'm just wondering if you could comment on that, because I think, you know, one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that that medium density is high enough so that we're not, that we're getting a little bit more compact design and not sprawl, and also ensuring, you know, more mixed housing. So could you comment on how you go from 30 to 16 as the minimum?
Sure, yes. So to maybe try and explain that a little better, is right now there's the majority of the site is that residential area designation, which is the lower densities. I'm just, oh, I don't have the slides that I can show you, but essentially the residential area designation, which is the yellow portion and the majority of the site, has a density of 12 to 25 units per net hectare. And it's only the pink component on the current designation, which is the smaller portion sort of in the east side of the site, that is the 30 to 100. So overall, by changing the complete site to this medium density special and allowing for a minimum of 16 as opposed to 12 and 30, like the mixture of 12 and 30, the whole thing is a little bit more dense than it would have been otherwise. It's still comparable, but because of that, it allows for the ability for the whole site to be a little bit more dense.
Yeah, I'm hoping that maybe staff could comment a little bit more on that when we get the report back, because it occurs to me when you go in that range, it could be more dense or it could be less dense, depending on what gets built and how it gets designed out. But that's perhaps something that staff could comment on when the staff report comes back to us.
Mr. Bannon, did you note that request from Councillor Vasilakos?
For your worship, yes, I've noted that and will ensure that when we bring forward a report, we'll discuss those densities.
Thank you. Councillor Ritzma, I saw your hand next.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Just with regards to the road widening on line 36, could you explain a little bit of what that looks like? Is that a turning lane or is that an actual widening of the entire road? If you could just give a little bit more description of that.
Sure, yes, I think it's just a typical road widening that the municipality would take whenever they're looking to do any works on that road. It was explained to us that they would be putting that multi-use path along the south side of the road as a part of this development. That's really the extent of what I know about the reasoning for the widening.
Other member of council having a question at this time? Seeing none, Ms. Atkins, do you have any information or any comments in the chat box that you'd like to read back to council?
Through you, your worship, there are no comments that have been submitted through the question and answer function in Zoom.
Okay, there is none noted there. If there's no other questions from members of council, does the applicant have any closing comments they'd like to make at this time?
I have nothing further, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. City Council intends to consider this application at a future Planning and Heritage Committee meeting where members of council will have an opportunity for full discussion of the application after reviewing comments received from the public at this time. If anyone would like to receive further notice of this application, please email clerks@stratford.ca. A video of this meeting will be posted to the city's website, and I will declare this public meeting adjourned at this time and will reconvene in council. And I believe we have the confirmatory bylaw to be read a first and second time for today's meeting. Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Burback moving and seconding. Discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Third and final reading, moved by Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Clifford. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. And a motion to adjourn this afternoon's proceedings. Councillor Seven and Councillor Henderson. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe.